CRWS, Countering Racism White Supremacy Book Club. Like, share, subscribe, and comment below.
Black people in all kinds of ways, all the time, 24/7, are taught to be people who function with animosity against black people, starting with the individual black person, him or herself. The system of white supremacy automatically is set in a very direct and indirect manner in every area of activity to make a black person have contempt, first of all, for himself or herself under the conditions of white supremacy. And then that contempt, people can't stand being contemptuous of themselves, because after all, you have to be with yourself 24 hours a day. So what you do is look around for somebody that looks exactly like you, and you try to dump that contempt on them in any way that you can. Oh, Negro, you don't know nothing. Okay. Some type of put down. All the comedy shows, put down, put down, put down, put down. Overweight black females sitting in a fancy booth in a fancy cafe. I mean, spending big money. And you see that on television. That's what I'm looking at. And it's all about putting down. Hands on hips, goosenecking with a blonde wig on, and a whole bunch of powder on their face to hide the color. Okay? That's what you're looking at. So you have generations and generations and generations now being raised, I mean, little toddlers looking at that on television, and that's the core of their quote-unquote education. That's the answer to that question, if you go by the truth. The white supremacists, where did that come from? Why is this being pushed more now than ever? Because a few black people worldwide are beginning to show that we are about producing constructive results. And the white supremacists said, no, you're not. You black people start producing constructive results or start being constructive about anything. Stop all this putting each other down and killing each other and robbing and stealing and glorifying gangsterism. No, we're going to crank that up. We're going to crank that up. A whole lot of black females without nothing, ain't even got a decent boyfriend, not to say nothing about looking forward to ever having a husband, okay? Just sitting around yelling and screaming at each other. Even when they're supposed to be relaxing and visiting each other, there's just a lot of yelling and screaming and cursing and storming out of the room, and then after 15 minutes storm back and start fighting, and then sit down and cool off again before they start the whole cycle all over again. Yeah. And they're taking up all the prime TV time doing this. Now, is this the way to educate? But you'll sit everybody in front of the room to keep them busy. Yeah. All right. Well, let's look at the black program. And when you say that, it's all downhill right there.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to CRWS, attempted counter racist business meeting on Kyrie and the Heroes Race Code War, the power of words, images, and symbols on the Black Psyche. We're covering pages 289 through 313. And this section was very, very significant and interesting because it covers a lot of the incorrect areas of Black culture, meaning what Black people, non-white people are doing on planet Earth with their time and energy. And tragically enough, most of that is being mistreated under the system of white supremacy by white people in that system, or mistreating each other because we have been trained in that manner, as the words Amelia Fuller Jr. has stated prior to the beginning of the broadcast. So I'm just going to read the beginning of this section, color code war, because I think this part is really important. Definitions are very important. So this is from 289. According to Webster's new dictionary, definitions of the word color range from a phenomenon of light to a visual perception that enables one to differentiate otherwise identical objects to skin pigmentation other than white characteristics of race. Color is the visible perception that permits humans to determine differences within such categories such as flowers, birds, dogs, cats, and humans. In nature, all colors and hues are equal in value, and each serves a particular purpose. So I think it's very interesting that in the Webster's dictionary, at least this one that Kyrie and Harold had access to, called skin pigmentation other than characteristics of white. Basically, everyone not white has color in their skin, or at least white people believe so according to this definition. And what white people have done with color is that they have seems to me they've turned everyone against color. Color is is bad. We call things it was a dark day. We blacklist things. We blackball things as if it's a negative. So it seems like racist men and racist women have trained the entire planet against color. And Kyrie and Rahel logically stated that the creator did not create color to be used in this manner, to be divided up and to be put in some sort of hierarchy. But that's what white people have done. And I hope this is making sense. And I'm gonna pause right there, see if folks want to chime in.
Yes, it made sense to me. So the author begins talking about the creation of the color-based society or race-based society. Basically, white people do the color classification. He says color has been codified, racialized, and politicized, and has become a major tool of racial warfare. The value of life and the quality of life are determined by color, skin, hair, eyes, and even the color of a neighborhood. Then one thing that he was talking about that I kind of paid attention to was the concept of social value versus economic value. And later on, he also mentions perceived value. So when he talks about social value, he says social value versus economic value. He says that they're different from one another. Social value is an individual is social value is determined by the group, the collective image of a group or population. Economic value is, I guess, a victim's access to big money and economic resources. But the important piece of this is that Black people, their social value is more relevant than their economic value, because there are numerous victims of racism who have great big money, economic abundance, yet they are still mistreated because of the social value of Black people as a whole, basically racism. So no matter how much money a Black person has, right, capitalism, they are still going to be subject to mistreatment under the system of racism and white supremacy. He also goes on to mention that no matter what a Black person does, right, a victim of racism, they cannot escape the social value. Social value for me, that just means racism. So no matter what, there's plenty of examples. No matter what victims of racism do, they cannot escape the white people practicing racism, white supremacy.
Yeah, and do you know what? And I think it's probably good to or constructive to just read a definition of color, how they explain color in the Collins English Dictionary over here. It's probably the same in various dictionaries around the planet actually, but this one's interesting. It describes it as color. This is a definition of color: an attribute of things that results from the light they reflect, transmit, or emit, insofar as this light causes a visual sensation that depends on its wavelengths, and also it's the aspect of visual perception by which an observer recognizes this attribute. So when we think of like the whole concept of color, an actual color is really as it pertains to how much light that is absorbed by you, the perceiver, right? So however much light is reflected off of that particular object or thing, right? So really colors are, and they aren't just concepts. Colors just are things that are, really. So in other words, if we're observing something that's in quite a light room, an illuminated room, as they say, you can see it. You can see different various objects, but as soon as that room's very, very dark and your pupils are not as dilated, you are not going to be probably able to discern different things, images, or colors in that room. So light, colors, very, very important. But in terms of color, they really are just it just depends on how much light is reflected by that particular color. So yeah, and it's interesting in the third paragraph where Kahari and Ahara says the concept of social value under white supremacy is based on the collective image of a group or population. And some people, if they read this paragraph, they probably might miss that little part there at the start of that paragraph where it said the concept of social value under white supremacy is based on the collective image of a group or population. And that's significant because under this system of white supremacy, there are some people who would look at a particular Black person, for instance, that has a lot of money, say like an Oprah Winfrey or a Jay-Z, and say that that's representative of that color group, but it's not. It's into white supremacy, as Neely Fuller Jr. eloquently puts it as well. It's based on perception. So it's based on percentages, based very, very much on percentages. There are some non-white people, Black people especially, who will be, singled out, and those Black people probably won't have as much ill treatment as the wider percentage of other Black people, other people that look like that individual Black person. So very important when we're looking at different colored people as it relates to mistreatment in this system of white supremacy.
Yeah, well said, Mr. Damages and Mr. Kwaku. Precisely, it seems that the races, they have codified color, especially the color of people or how they perceive the color of people, and they have made it so that a person's entire existence is dictated on their color. And as we see, if you are classified as Black and you have dark skin pigmentation, no matter where you are, you are going to be mistreated. And where there are large numbers of dark-skinned people, 10 times out of 10, those areas are not as constructive as areas where mostly white people dwell, like comparing like areas of the world known as areas in the world known as Africa, comparing that with like areas of the world known as Norway, Iceland, where white people dwell. Huge differences. People in Norway are allowed to have tons of food, tons of comfort, where you know, the area of the world known as Africa, North Africa, and Middle East. Tons of suffering, tons of mistreatment. And what's the obvious difference that most of us pretend is not there? This difference in skin color. Tons of dark people and what white people often call the dark continent, which is just another race camp that we've been confused by calling Africa. Africa does not exist. You know, this entire planet is dominated by racist people who have codified a color everywhere. So I hope what I'm saying makes sense. And Iceland, so-called Iceland, does not also exist. It's just another race camp operated and maintained by racist men and racist women. And what they've done is they've just pitted us. Not only have they produced this war based off color, that they've got its victims to mistreat each other based off their color. Evidently with how blacks, myself included, have been trained to mistreat each other, in all areas of people activity. So we're going to get into it. Kyrie and Harold describes the situation very, very accurately, I would say. The one's entire existence is based off their color, and that is not correct. This is not how the planet should be maintained. This should not be the current functions of planet Earth. You are mistreated simply because you were born with skin pigmentation. Makes no sense unless we are in a system of white supremacy. Then the racist logic makes a lot of sense, but this is counter racist logic here. So our goal is to eliminate racism and white supremacy and produce a system of justice where no one is allowed to be mistreated, and those who need help receive constructive help. It's a very simple concept that we're trying to implement here.
I agree. I think that many victims of racism will deny the fact that we live in this color-based coded society. And he mentions the old catchphrase, the color code war's oldest catchphrase still has power. And I think it's a good question to ask yourself whether or not this is still true and relevant today. The first time I heard this was from Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Before that, I'd never heard the phrase, but he says the color code war's oldest catchphrase still has power. If you are white, you are all right. If you are yellow, you're mellow. If you are brown, stick around. If you're black, get back. I think that this absolutely is still a powerful catchphrase, still very relevant across the planet. If you look across the globe, anywhere you find Black people, I always say that you will find death, despair, and destruction going on. Anywhere that you find white people, you find economic abundance, security, basically the opposite situation. So I think that this catchphrase definitely accurately sums up the situation on the planet.
Very true. And I think it's necessary to point out as well that other non-white people who, in terms of what we're saying with the if you're white, you're all right, and at the bottom of that social structure in a system of white supremacy is obviously Black people, Black get back. It's necessary to point out, I think, that the other non-white people who are in the middle of that structure, they definitely do understand their mistreatment under this system in comparison to us who are classified as Black by the white supremacists. They definitely understand their where they are in that system, and they understand it so much that they definitely don't want to be where we are. They would rather not be classified as Black by the white supremacists on this planet, whilst under a system of racism, white supremacy. And I think that's played out in why we have, I don't know, among Black people, there is a Neely Fuller Jr., there was obviously a Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, popular names, Dr. Welsing, etc. But you don't have, as far as I know, I could be mistaken, but as far as I know, you don't have an Indian or a Chinese, for example, Neely Fuller Jr. or Dr. Welsing, or any of the equivalent. As far as I know, I could be incorrect, but I think that's proof that the white supremacists understand that, and the other non-white people who are not classified as Black understand their code, their color, and what that means to them in regards to their mistreatment on this planet in the system of racism, white supremacy.
I agree. That's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, as to why, they from these other color classifications, why there haven't been individuals to, come up and contribute to solving the race problem, like Neely Fuller. But it would probably be more constructive. I focus on myself. I think that's more codified. But I also wanted to add that. I wanted to add, lost that thought. It might come to me shortly after. I'm gonna mute my mic.
Thank you, thank you, Bo. He also has mentioned here the section examples of what he calls color code war messages, and it's just images that white people have implanted. Well, I should say white people who practice racism, white supremacy, images they planted into our psyche that they've coded. Like, for example, white paint. The closest thing to having a white body he describes it as. But I'm gonna play a image on the screen really quickly, and then I'm going to talk about another one of his color code war messages. He has to code it here, and it has been mentioned by other counter-racist scholars before.
10, 9, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Command engine start. 2, 1. Ignition. We have liftoff. Shepard cleared the tower.
And New Shepard has cleared the tower on our way to space with our first human crew. Go, Jeff, go. Mark, go. Molly, go. Oliver, you are going to space.
So another one of his decodings he has here is white rocket ships, and he decodes it as a white phallus, sexual, explosive, and with reproductive power. But from my studies, I understand that this is more than this, than what he has stated. This is the expansion of white supremacy and to what Buzz Lightyear says, to infinity and beyond. Like, they want to take the system of white supremacy into the outer space, which is the only thing I fear in existence, is them actually expanding this system to other planets, which is what they want to do. And yeah, this is very still a very coded image with the the white rocket ship, and the people on board only being white people, one being a old white woman and a young white man, and a also older white man. So very symbolic of what is being represented here. And just going on, adding to the other color code war messages he has here, white hat, which means the good guy, the winner, and the best and most important person. One where they will pay attention to cinema, especially older cinema, they will see this coded. I want to pay attention to words in 2022, and especially in the what they call the hacker community. They have white hat hackers, which are supposed to be the good hackers who like defend people against the black hat hackers who allegedly hack for nefarious, dark purposes. A white person would describe it as, but that's just a racist language and the color code war we're in. And there's a ton here of color code war messages that he has. Urge you to get your copy of the book if you want to see all of them or learn all of them. And I'm gonna pause my mic there.
I wanted to add. I remembered my thought when Smoking Damages was talking about other non-white people understanding their place in the racial hierarchy. it also made me think about oftentimes why other victims of racism oftentimes like to associate themselves with Black people, other Black people. So I've been led to believe that for them, it's like, it helps them look better. You know, I think that subconsciously or even consciously, they understand that if they have a Black person with them, they probably won't be as mistreated, right? The Black person is there to kind of take the most mistreatment. That's all I wanted to add. But on the color, the color code war messages, I saw one that stuck out to me was white envelopes. It says the meaning is licking the white penis / vagina, the act of using the tongue to wet and stick. Definitely did not think about that, but that was definitely one that stuck out to me. A very long list. I would suggest that anybody interested in it should get their copy of the book.
I wanted to add to like when I read just entirely like the section that we read, it almost got me thinking of what's that word? The word colorism. I've only heard this word colorism from Black people, and it almost like makes sense now why there is a focus on colorism. And I think it's because it's easier to say colorism than it is to identify the actual problem. And I think this word exists due to obviously assimilation and wanting to assimilate into white culture because we live in a white dominant like in structures and systems. So especially when you are trying to assimilate into a system, your first thought is, oh, well, there's a colorism. And if I focus on colorism, that just means that everybody, even lighter skinned Black people, are against the darker skinned Black people. Or lighter skinned Black people get all of these things and they're better off and they're just living their best life. And then dark skinned Black people get nothing. You know, but then you have people who are dark skinned and they get little trinkets and you're like, well, it's still colorism. It has to do with that. It's not about simply white people or white domination. So then going through the color code war messages, it just makes sense. You know, it makes sense to where it's easier to blame or to like identify the lighter skinned people and within, okay, I'm gonna say so-called like Black communities, but Black people, than it is to identify white people as a problem. And I think also with these race code or color codes, it makes it to where the focus is the lighter skinned people than it is the white people. Because it's like, hey, it's not that we're not letting any Black people in. We're just letting the light skinned ones in. We're giving them a few more trinkets. So you could have those inner war with your own people. So it's just very interesting.
I agree. Colorism, that was also one that I marked down. I thought that, especially the section on color code war on beauty, that for me kind of changed my perspective when it comes to Black females. I know in the past, you know, I think I still stand by this, but you know, I think Black females not, you know, engaging in certain beauty practices is the ultimate practice of Black self-respect, but also having to understand that Black females especially have been most victimized by these beauty standards. And I think it's important for more patience to be practiced with Black females, especially in this area, because they have been the most victimized when it comes to beauty standards. It says that the color code war on beauty, usually the most blatant acts of racism are practiced with the usage of like beautiful versus ugly, right? White and lighter skin is beautiful, dark and darker skin is ugly. and that the light-skinned Black females have always been most preferred by the white supremacists. They too are also victims in all of this. The white supremacist has merely used them as a tool to confuse, distract Black people from the ultimate goal of producing a system of justice. Rather, we have darker skinned Black people focusing on lighter skinned Black people in so-called colorism wars, or whatever you want to call it, and perceiving them as the problem. I mean, I have some time ago, I had a dark-skinned female associate who was going out trying to, trying to be a model, right? And often pointed the finger, started blaming Black males for their part in it. And I think Black males do have a role in colorism, so-called colorism, but focusing on the fact that Black males were not picking her to be in their music videos, right? These Black male rappers, victims of racism, are not picking dark-skinned females to be in their music videos. And that was her point of contention. Ultimately, colorism is a problem, right? But the issue is that racist man and racist woman, the white supremacists, have conditioned and taught Black people to prefer, fall in love with things that are white or near white. That's all I got so far on colorism.
Wait,
Yeah,
that term colorism is such a confusion bomb of a term, because it definitely points the fingers at other non-white people as the root of the thinking behind why they don't like darker skinned people. I wouldn't even I think that term is, the racists love us using that term, because colorism is just, racism, white supremacy. It's just
exactly.
it's the result of us being trained to not like Black people in general, dark things in general. It's not colorism, because we're not out there hating green trees, brown trees because of that color. We're not out there hating red cars because of that color. We only hate dark people because anti-Blackness, it's against Black people. So I'm not gonna use the term. I think the term is very it's a confusion bomb. So
that's so funny, right? Just as you were saying that, and as Quakey was saying that, exactly, I was writing down a different definition, because I think we need a compensatory definition, one that works for us a little better than the term colorism. So because colorism doesn't identify the people who are responsible for the brain trash confusion, right, called what we have been led to call colorism. So my suggested counter-racist phrase, instead of colorism, we should just call it white supremacist color programming. I mean, that's what I'm going to say. It's not as exactly as succinct as colorism, but instead of using colorism, I'm just going to replace that with white supremacist color programming. I think it identifies the people who are responsible for the phenomenon, and and it keeps the focus on them, because they are the problem and they created the confusion.
Absolutely, A+. I like that term. I think that is the problem with the use of colorism, and I personally have never liked. I've never liked the word. I've never liked victims of racism, using that as like a point of like problem solving. That's definitely not the problem. I think that's definitely a distraction, and I think the author definitely goes in depth to talk about why that isn't the problem, and that's, like you said, white supremacy color programming.
And just to emphasize, I should say, how well of a job the white supremacists have color coded and programmed us. And this from 292, Kyrie and Hero says, Colors do not exist in a vacuum. What is a white day and how does it differ from a black day? Are white days good and black days bad? People have become so conditioned to believing and accepting the subtleness of derogatory language regarding black people that this language is hardly given a second thought. The term black day is a misnomer. The word day implies that the sun is shining. It can be okay. I don't have to read the rest, but yeah, you kind of get the picture. And so I think this is like suggesting to us to like ask more questions about what is being said, especially when we hear just anyone saying what exactly is a why is it called a black market? Why are all these negatives associated with black people all of the time? It's 2022. We have to get out of this this behavior of just not thinking about using the correct words, and I do appreciate your compensation of that word. That's really I'm gonna continue to call it anti-blackness, but that's also a great word.
Yeah, I think that with that section about the word usage, so even throwing in colorism, the code often talks about the power of words and why it's important to understand definitions and the use of the word. So I think for me, I think it would be more helpful for me to create new definitions, because you can also create new definitions for words or even words to describe something. I think it'll be helpful if I don't agree with something to create my own word and definition, just like smoking damages did right now. So I'm going to attempt to do that more to clear up confusion.
Exactly, right. That's exactly what I think we should do. We should just make up our own definitions, terms that work for us, like Neely Fuller Jr. suggests. That whole just any term we wanna make up, like Hari Enahara says here, when we don't pay attention to certain things, the term Black Day is a misnomer, right? The very word day implies that the sun is shining. So just things that we don't really pay attention to. Black Day, it just means a displeasing time. A displeasing time in your life, something that you don't like, a displeasing moment or a displeasing day. But we have to associate it with a color. It's so when we really stand back and look at it, it's so nonsensical. But yeah, I'll definitely encourage other non-white people, any kind of thing because actually, for example, we was in a Twitter space probably last week or the week before. Me and Helen B were on a Twitter space, and we were talking to a white person, and this white person, actually, we talk about racism, white supremacy in general, and this white woman said something about colorism, and she said that's an example of how Black people can be quote unquote racist towards each other. Black people can practice racism while each other, right? So she was very, very comfortable using the term colorism, because colorism doesn't even describe the people who are responsible for it. Doesn't say anything about white people who actually created the problem. So that's why that's why a lot of these white supremacists are really comfortable using terms that don't actually identify them as the problem. So yeah, I definitely advise other victims to just use your brain computers, use our brain computers to come up with different definitions that help us to solve this problem. Even if the white supremacists use it, they will have to identify themselves as the problem.
Absolutely.
From the chat, Edward Williams says colorism and quotations doesn't exist, and I concur. Just like America doesn't, it's just something we've been led to believe that it's real.
Agreed. I think Black people, racist man, racist woman have taught Black people to mistreat each other based on color, just like they taught the rest of the planet. So really, that is what's going on. Colorism is a distraction. Doesn't actually exist.
Exactly. White supremacist color programming is a symptom of the system of racism, white supremacy.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about more of that symptom right now with the whole dark skin, light skin, just the anti-blackness we have been trained to share towards one another. So I'm gonna read. I'm gonna read from 296. I'm gonna read from the second paragraph, and then I'm gonna go up. So it says, every standard and measurement of beauty in Western civilization begins with color and then proceeds from there. Then I'm gonna go to the top of 296. In 1986, my bad. In 1983, Vanessa Williams, the first Black woman to win the title of Miss America, was a light-skinned Black female after she was dethroned in 1984 while a college student for posing nude in Penthouse magazine. Her replacement was another light-skinned Black female. The 2002 Miss America was another Black female from Illinois named Erica Harold, who looks like a white female with a deep tan. The most sensual and alluring Black women under the concept of white supremacist domination are still the light tan and light brown Black women. Never has an extremely dark-skinned Black female with broad features, large buttocks, and short nappy hair won the beauty contest. Yeah, this is written in 2000 and well, published in 2003. And this is still evident today. We still have been trained to focus and to be attracted to Black females who I'm not gonna I'm just gonna say Black females who have lighter skin. And this is evident throughout planet Earth, throughout the globe, wherever we see people in general. People in general have been trained and conditioned to be attracted to lighter skin females, and they have been trained to want to be lighter in a large number of cases. When I used to exist and dwell in Hong Kong, the area of the world known as Hong Kong, I went to the beach. And even before I went to the beach, I noticed all the pale Asians who were hiding from the sun with their umbrellas, refusing to get darker, even when on the beach, they're still, wearing all this protection from the sun, not wanting to get darker. And that's because they have been successfully programmed with the white chip, with the racist logic that, hey, if you're white, your existence is going to be more comfort. You're going to be mistreated less. But if you're one of the dark-skinned Asians walking around here, best believe you're going to be mistreated, and best believe you're not going to have the economic comfort that we allow you paler folks around here to have in what we call Hong Kong. So it's really global. This problem is really global, and non-white people globally should be focused on solving this problem, not just us. It should be every non-white person on the planet.
Yep, it's sad, and I think we definitely understand how pervasive it is, this type of programming, with the the proliferation down through these down through the decades of skin lightening creams, right? These skin lightening creams are very, 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 very popular. Anything that that can, in any sort of attempt to kind of run away, distance ourselves from quote unquote our blackness, or any kind of features associated with people who are the darkest skinned on this planet, people who are the white supremacists have classified as Black. So we want to straighten the hair, and we want to and we want to use skin lightening creams to lighten our skin to look as light as possible, as close to white as possible. So yeah, it's very, very, very unfortunate. And the white supremacists definitely know. They they sit back and watch that, and they think, yep, as long as you lot are trying to look like us, then we understand how strong our system of racism, white supremacy is.
I think many victims don't understand the conditioning and the practice of racist men and racist women picking these Black females to represent, these light-skinned Black females to represent Black beauty standards, I guess. He says,
Oh, your mic got muted, Mr. Peku. He said what?
On 296, he says, the lighter skinned Black female, through no fault of her own, is the first one in the door, and she is still portrayed by the white dominated media as the most beautiful and acceptable of Black females. I think the key word is white dominated media. Just like the picture that O5 has up on the screen, Black people did not make this competition. They are not the curators, they are not the creators. And I don't believe Black people pick these Black females to win, right? These are all chosen by racist man and racist woman. And through this, many altercations and conflicts have come up. Black people fighting one another, pointing at light-skinned females, blaming them for their problems, all sorts of confusion. And I also liked how he mentioned that the light-skinned Black female, however, is not one step above the dark-skinned Black female. I'm on 297. While being told that she's the prettiest, she is still imaged in a racist, sexist manner as a hot female with an unlimited and perverted sexual drive. The Academy Award-winning and degrading performance of Halle Berry in the motion picture Monster Ball is very clear evidence that the image of Black females, regardless of skin tone, has not dramatically changed. So I think this should be a blueprint, sort of, for Black people to understand that these light-skinned females, this racist color programming is nothing more than a tool for racist man and racist woman to confuse and distract, deceive victims of racism. The light-skinned female, just like any other person on the planet, all other color classifications, is nothing but a tool to be used, and then once used and abused, to be thrown away in the garbage.
Completely agree. And if some non-white people want an example, Monster Ball obviously is mentioned, but you should definitely check out a film called Angel Heart with Lisa Bonet. Lisa Bonet, film called Angel Heart. If victims want to check out that white supremacist color programming at work there on full display. Yeah.
It also reminds me of, going back to the music videos and how a lot of these victims of racism, male rappers will display Black females, especially light-skinned females, in their music videos, but it's all in a derogatory manner. So, obviously you're talking to other confused victims, but the question is, why would you want to be portrayed like that in the first place? Why do you want to be displayed like that in those videos? That has always been my question, logically. Like, let's think about that. Sure, you're not being picked to be in the music videos, and I guess that's somewhat of a tragedy in its own, but why would you want to be image derogatorily imaged in these music videos, as nothing but a hoe, a sexual deviant, etc.
Yep, and the white supremacists know that type of programming, the white supremacist color programming, is designed to just create more animosity between victims of racism, white supremacy, just animosity between ourselves. So whilst we're arguing about who's the lighter skinned and who's getting more quote unquote privileges or better treatment under a system of racism, white supremacy, because they look closer in color to our masters on this planet, now we're arguing among each other, and the focus is on each other, and the focus is completely off of racist man and racist woman who've created the color confusion in our minds.
Yes, and to add to that also, right, because light-skinned Black females still victims of racism, due to this color programming. It says, in reality, Her lighter color buys her nothing except anger from dark-skinned females. And that is absolutely true. Right there, Black females are now focusing on lighter-skinned Black females and directing all the anger, rage, resentment at the wrong person, the incorrect people, right? The light-skinned Black female is not responsible for the condition that you find yourself in. That is white people practicing racism, white supremacists, racist man, racist woman, and even racist child. That is where that anger and rage should be directed, not at another victim of racism.
Indeed, excellent, excellent exchanges. So he mentions that the situation is really dire and tragic. He mentions how racist man and racist woman have trained Black males in particular, and I would say males in general, to just but speaking about the Black males, how Black males, he says that will jump over a number of dark-skinned Black females to get their hands on a lighter skinned female, and I suspect this is very, very correct, and tragically I don't have to look further than my victim unit to see this being very evident. You know, especially of the, if I look at the darkest of the people in my victim unit, and I see who they've chose as a mate, it's usually a lighter, a much lighter skinned person. While they haven't admitted that it's because of their current condition of a victim of racism, I suspect it may be because the programming is very, 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 it's there, and few of us will admit that, yeah, we will only no, many of us, the programming is so normalized, just how much we've been trained to hate, you know, ourselves and people who look like us, or at least not like us, or people who look like us. It's evident. You hear a lot of Black males say that, yeah, I don't date dark females, I don't date, you know, Black females, or you even hear or see Black females saying that they're looking for a white man, or they don't date dark looking guys. So the conditioning that white people have gave us, especially white people who practice racism, is very, very sickening, and it should be motivation for us, you know, to say, you know what, I'm tired of even being classified as Black. First of all, I'm not even Black, I'm kind of brown. Let's work towards being universal man and universal woman. So none of us are having to talk about, you know, straight hair and narrow noses, because this is what white people have us focused on, you know, silly nonsense, because this is a race problem, a really, really serious problem. But talking about it in this manner, I'm just gonna pause there and see if I want to chime in before I continue this rant.
Yeah, I was gonna say on 299, there's a little paragraph here. I think is quite timely here to read it. I think Kahari and Ahara sums this up quite well. 299 on this second paragraph here, it says, lighter skinned Black females with thin lips, straighter noses, and thinner hips are given greater status and have more value among Black males in the Black community. You know, well, I don't know why he says community here, but anyway, Black men will still jump over 5 dark-skinned sisters, pause there again, to get a light-skinned sister. In a crowd of Black women, they will look for and spot the light-skinned woman first. To test the validity of this statement, ask the following question. How many Black men in this area of the world consider the very Black-skinned females of Haiti or Congo as the most beautiful women in the world? The answer is very few. Yet many of these same Black men will include the Latina actress Jennifer Lopez or J-Lo as among the most sexy and desirable. And until Black people begin to see the very Black-skinned women of Haiti and Congo or even Mississippi as physically beautiful, the deep color rejection will remain and grow deeper, right? And it's interesting what he says here, and definitely we should take note of that, because until we do begin to undo that programming, then all that's going to happen is just more animosity among us as the most victimized under this system of race and white supremacy, Black people. We'll just queue up more and more and more animosity between ourselves, and we definitely aren't going to direct that anger and that animosity towards the white people who are responsible for the programming. We'll just direct that animosity towards ourselves. So we definitely need to we need to recognize racism, white supremacy in plain sight. It's plain sight, but we still can't see it. It's been practiced right under our noses, so to speak, but we just fail to see it. We're going to have to look at that and understand the damage, the psychological damage that this system has had on us collectively. Understand what it's done to our image of self, the way that we look at each other, and the way that we look at them.
I think one thing too that would be easier is like even looking at the color value rating. What page is this? 306. It almost is, I don't want to say inevitable, but it has to be like a self thing instead of looking outwards. Because, you know, most people are like, oh, let me see some inspo of my outfit or inspo of what is beautiful. Like most people get their beauty from looking at something else. But oftentimes, obviously, we're looking at we're looking at white people. Realistically, we're looking at white people, even if they're a shade darker or whatever shade they are. These people are continuously perpetuating this white beauty. So then when it comes to how they value themselves, they may have what they call, maybe find a new word, but like low self-esteem. Most people are like, oh, low self-esteem is like someone who doesn't think maybe they're beautiful, or they're having these insecurities because they're comparing themselves to white people every single day. And then you come in and you're like, oh, well, Black men are not choosing me because I'm dark and all these things. But it's like you're Black, but you're striving to be white. So it's like, why don't they just get a white person if you're like just darker skin, but you're wanting to be white? So there's like really no difference. I think when it comes to like the individual, it's important to look at this chart on 306 and 307. And I think it even continues. Oh yeah, just 306 and 307, and even before, to just see and understand the value rating that white people have created. And then you come up with your own, thank you for putting that on the screen, coming up with your own like code. And I think that's like what people are saying, like what we've been saying throughout the book club, is like Black people need a code. And I think that is important, because when it even comes to beauty standards or beauty itself, or just things that you think about, and there needs to be a certain code that you follow. And it cannot be a white person. It cannot be white supremacist ideologies, because you're going to be left in the dumps. Or I don't want to use the word dumps, but you're going to be left feeling as if you're lower than what you think you are, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
That was an excellent segue to discussing the conditioning that we have received. But then quickly, go ahead before I begin.
Oh, thank you. I was gonna say absolutely. I think it was Dr. Francis Cresswell Singh that said all Black people should get a picture of the deepest, darkest Black female you can find and put it up in your house, and then walk by it every day and just look at how beautiful that picture is. But I think also to add to this section, specifically talking about Black males and the racist, white supremacist color programming, that oftentimes when you talk about this with Black people, victims of racism especially, they'll start saying things like, oh, that's my preference, not understanding that their preference, their values have been given to them by racist man and racist woman. So I thought that's very relevant to this discussion, because I feel like that is said, it's going, now they are effectively finding ways to avoid talking about it, right? You know, it's that's my preference. You can't be mad at me for my preference. That's what I like. You know, all of that given to them by racist man and racist woman.
Yep, starts from when we're very, very young. When we're very, very young. I think you guys were talking about religion the last week or the week before. Starts very, very young with that white Jesus. You know, where we had the programming in school, magazines, TV, everything. You know, you got white people. You have white people who don't even think the Jesus picture is an accurate picture of Jesus now on the planet. Lots of white people accept that that's probably not an accurate picture, but they will never even countenance the whole idea of themselves bowing down in front of a black Jesus character. And they would never think of allowing their children to bow down in front of a black Jesus character. You know, most white people, and there might be some that would, but by and large, you will not see white people who will even countenance the idea of allowing themselves and their children to bow down in front of a black deity, because they understand how important color is. There are some black people, like Quakey was just saying about, you know, oh, it's just a preference. It's no. White people really understand. That's why when we say, sometimes when we're talking to white people and we say, who's more confused about racism, white supremacy, and the white person always say, oh, I think white people are. No, they're not. They're not confused. They're not confused. It's black people that are confused. We are the ones who are the most confused because we are the victims of it. We don't understand collectively how important the visual representation of color is on our psyche, but they do. They will never bow down in front of a black deity collectively on mass, because obviously color is very, very important.
Insanely important in an insane system such as white supremacy and racism. So I'm gonna shout out to Ray/01 for providing the image, and also he said in the chat that symptoms are always focused on, never the causation. Yes, we are, precisely. But I'm gonna have this image on the screen for the remainder of the broadcast to help with the reconditioning, because as we see here on page 302, racist man, racist woman, racist child have conditioned us to view black females of this color or near this color as extremely undesirable. And that's totally incorrect, because this black female and the black male counterpart to this black female is responsible for all existence, people existence on planet Earth, so white people have said. But that's not even important. No person deserves such mistreatment, especially the sort of mistreatment that black people have experienced collectively across the planet, simply because white people have said, you know what, it'll be real easy to, you know, just focus on all the dark people during our business of white supremacy. It'll make things run real smoothly if you just convince the entire planet to focus on mistreating and thinking black people are ugly, monkey-like creatures who are worthy of being mistreated. If we could figure that out, we'd be in business, and they have done it, and they are in business. So it should be our business to eliminate their business and produce a system of justice, you know, where no one is being mistreated simply because of how they look. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely insane. So if this has been on the screen long enough for folks to have, you know, give it a glance and see that, you know, black females has been conditioned to be and portrayed to be fat, ugly, loud. I mean, if you pay attention to black culture, entertainment, whatever you want to call it, we'll see that. I was skimming through. I'll just put it on the screen so folks don't know I am lying. You know, where is it? Proud Family. I never watched this show ever, but I was watching just a tiny bit of it. And just a little of what I saw was like, oh, wow, yeah, it's, of course, ghetto glorification. And just, you know, oh, look at the image that I randomly clicked to. We have the lead black male character being portrayed as an animal, like having fleas and whatnot. So this images have been normalized, and it's our job to, you know, be aware of it and to understand that, hey, this is part of the race war against us.
Oh, were you gonna play it, or you don't need
Oh
to?
no, I don't need to play it. The image is worth
Okay.
it. No worries.
Exactly. I completely agree. The author also talks about the impact of this color code war. I think I think that's kind of what we've been discussing, that right, who's more confused about racism, white supremacy, white people or black people. I think obviously black people are most confused by it because they don't even understand the impacts of this, like Smoking Damages was saying. He also talks about the perceived value versus the social value. As we mentioned, the social value earlier, perceived value is the value that often other traits are taken out. So education, money, all that. None of that is attached to the perceived value of Black people. And once again, perceived value of Black people is lower than every other color classification on the planet, because who created it? Racist man, racist woman. And at the bottom, you will always find Black people.
Yeah, this section really provided me with a lot more insight on like just the condition that we have been given, and it's particularly like the condition of the Black female, because not only has she been trained by the white supremacists to be in conflict with the Black males, but also with Black females, you know, the dark female and light females, and the light-skinned females have been trained to be in conflict with each other. And reading this section, I was it's very, very saddened to see how he describes the situation, and to see how even he's aware and he observed the animosity and the misery that some dark-skinned Black females carry and direct towards, you know, other Black people and not the system, because that's where the confusion leads us to direct the animosity and self-hate towards one another and not the system of white supremacy, because that's how confused we are. It was really, really tragic reading this section, and for me particularly.
One thing that I guess I was a little bit confused about, because essentially I feel like, well, he is talking about complexion, but when he's talking about like this value, you know, it goes from high value, supreme value, very noticeable, acceptable, measured acceptance. I was trying to figure out whether or not he means like, okay, so he says let me pick one out. So for preferred and desired stock, he says, this means that while the individual or population is not white, it is striving to be white, which is more comforting and positive under the color rules of modern racism. So for me, I kind of felt like it was a little bit of like, is it color classification and then like assimilation, if that makes sense? So even though that there are these groups that can never be white or classified as white, they're still given value for trying to be white. And you know what I mean? So I don't know if it's a little bit of both, or if he's strictly talking about color classification.
I think he's talking about racial classification, confusion, and racial population tailoring, especially when we get into what they have called Brazilization, which is just racial population confusion and racial classification confusion and population tailoring. We're definitely gonna get into that, but I think what he's talking about is that they're producing white people are producing new racial classifications that's going to further the confusion and further their divide and lessen the number of people actually classified as Black as the race war intensifies and carries on. So on page 308, I'm going to read a bit about what he says about this process. He says, in developing this new race color amalgam, the darker individual The darker skinned people, the darker individual and population has been marginalized and reduced, while the lighter to brown skinned population has dramatically increased. No other population, yellow, brown, red, or white, is being asked to give up their genetic or cultural identity to gain greater social acceptance. This strategy implies that dark Black people are socially unacceptable and must whiten up to be passable. This is the worst kind of white supremacy, the deliberate breeding out of dark-skinned people. The Brazilization process does several things. It reduces the actual number of Black people. It reduces the actual number of people classified as Black. Secondly, it creates additional color wars among Black people, because a color-based economic hierarchy will be established to engender and escalate resentment and anger. Thirdly, a new buffer population will replace white people as the frontline defense against Black people. The new racial populations will be separated and reclassified. So this is exactly what Neil Ford talks about when he talks about racial population tailoring, racial classification confusion. This is why people have produced a science around doing, keeping us confused. This is why we have a bunch of people who are actually Black calling themselves Puerto Rican and Dominicans. This is what white people have mastered, that sort of confusion, that racial classification confusion. And I suspect this is what Inaharo is explaining here as well. And that clear up some confusion, Kwaku?
Yes, it did. I wanted to add, I thought that this concept of Brazilization process was very interesting. I've known of Brazil, and I've known them to have a racial hierarchy. I didn't know that they were, making great attempts to create what he called a racial color buffer class. But I mean, that obviously makes sense. And this section also kind of cleared up some confusion that I had regarding Dr. Welsing's theory. Because one thing that I could never understand was that if white people hate Black people so much in color, why do they continue to have sex with Black people? No matter what, if a white person is having sex with a Black person, that child is still going to be colored. But I feel like it's helped me understand now, because as the white supremacist has effectively, and in most cases successfully, been able to control the Black genitals on the planet. So through controlling it and kind of what they're doing with this Brazilization process, they are getting rid of Black people, right? They're creating a lighter skin color class, effectively getting rid of all the dark skinned people. And that kind of helps me understand it more, because it still has the piece of, they still fear racial annihilation, genetic annihilation, but through them controlling it, they're able to create this buffer class. Also, another thing, I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that, but also another thing was when he mentioned that, he says, however, when he's talking about I'll just start. It says, there are major predictions that in the year 2050, racism will be eliminated because there will be only one color, and that will be the color brown. The prediction is based on such things as the projected low birth rate of white people and the higher birth rates of Latino and Asian non-whites and Black-white racial interbreeding. However, the dynamics of eugenics, cloning, and hidden biological advances are not calculated in these formulas. Do not be fooled. White supremacists will not commit racial suicide. So I've been seeing this prediction of a so-called brown race taking over, and I think it was also on Twitter, but where exactly are they talking about? Because the populations that are supposed to grow the largest over the next decades are supposed to be African continents. These very dark-skinned people are supposed to be growing. So there's not an abundance of white people on the continent. So I wouldn't imagine there's a lot of, you know, these lighter skinned children or lighter skinned babies popping up. So logically, like, where is this coming from that there's going to be a brown race, larger population on the planet? So there's that.
Yeah, I suspect those predictions came because if they are able to successfully, you know, lead non-white people to continue lightening up and having sex with white people and other groups of people who are going to produce black people, but who have lighter skin, then yeah, that's where I suspect those predictions come from, and that's white people will definitely appreciate. You know, there'll still be victims, just lighter skin classification of black people, but due to the confusion they will have with their classification and the comfort given to them with their position in the system, it'll do wonders for strengthening the system and making it that much harder for non-white people to want to solve the race problem, I suspect.
Exactly, and the white supremacists will just the light-skinned, just you know, another shade of brown, really. What they call black people, just another shade of brown, very, very light brown people. Really, they'll just keep them, you know, what they call the carrot on a stick or whatever. They'll keep them chasing that kind of acceptance among white people. It's really the white people who are going to determine if those non-white people are eventually going to be classified as white. They'll tell them that they're classified as white when they get ready to classify them as white. In about a year from now, or 2 years, or 5 years from now, when it suits them, they'll just say, well, actually, no, you're not white because we said so. We're not classifying you as white anymore. And that's just how that goes. And in terms of that whole, I've heard that as well, like what Kwaku said. I agree with you, 05 and Kwaku, where non-white, where some of the white supremacists have made these funny predictions about, you know, a lot of the world's population being brown, etc. But, you know, with that whole caveat, where some white people are saying that, and are trying to say that they're really uncomfortable about that, but really a lot of white people, I suspect, are not really uncomfortable about that at all, because they know that they can control that. When you can control the movements on the planet of non-white people, you can control where black people especially go to on this planet, then you can control what the population, the color population, looks like. You can control that. If you're going to control visas, if you're going to control exchange rate mechanism, you're going to control finances, you're going to control what kind of house someone can, if they're going to get housing, if they move to a particular place, if you're going to need this amount of money to move to a particular place on this planet, you are in effect controlling who is having sex with each other. That's why the system, that's why when Neely Fuller Jr. says all these areas of people activity are connected: economics, education, entertainment, labor law, politics, religion, sex, and war. That's not an underestimation, and that's just not something that he says that is just off the cuff. These areas of people activity are all interrelated. They're all connected. If you can control where someone can actually move, if you can control where someone works, if you can control where a whole group of people can actually go on this planet, you will control how many people have sex with each other. There are some non-white people who are fooling themselves and thinking, oh yeah, I'm having sex with this white person, or I'm having sex with this light-skinned black person, or this, like, it's all controlled. When they would want a large swathe of us not to have sex with white people anymore, they would just limit the amount of non-white people who can mix and have sex with white people. It's completely under their control. That's my theory anyway.
Well, very, very well said. Ray/0 from the chat says, at Kwaku, that's what I meant a few business meetings ago about meeting in the middle. It seems as if the white supremacists are attempting to make a confused version of a utopia, much like the book movie The Giver, and there was no race, just a utopia, but white people still control the information about the differences.
Yeah, and just sorry, 05. And just to piggyback off that as well, look at what's happening now with the Ukraine and the refugees, etc. Right? And look at the white supremacist attitude to where there are like so-called war-torn black areas of the planet, where these refugees are running all over the place trying to get to where the white people are. And the white people are saying, no, you can't come here. The white people say, no, you can't come here. But the white refugees now, who are called Ukrainian, they're welcoming them with open arms, giving them financial set-asides, etc. They, like I said, they control the movement of non-white people, and white supremacists, they go where they please, and they allow. So they're controlling the movements of people on the planet. So, the population, how the population looks, whilst we have a system of race and white supremacy, it will very much be determined by people who are classified as white.
Yeah, precisely. And back to what Ray 150 mentioned about how white people would like to create like a raceless utopia. There's no such thing, because a utopia is supposed to be like a place of peace, and the Yurugu, aka racist man and racist woman, they do not believe in a world without of conflict, a world without deceit and manipulation and violence and or direct violence. So it's just really telling, and it's evident that they would love to produce a system of white supremacy where everyone is still under the system and being mistreated by the system, but no one is aware of it, which is why you hear so many white people saying, and non-white people who are being led to this sort of confusion, to say, I don't see color, even though, back to that movie, The Giver, even though it's supposed to be a utopia where race didn't exist, when they made the movie, it was in black and white, which is a color-coded message in itself, because no matter how much you want to try to avoid the race problem, avoid racism, it's always there. It's always the giant black and white elephant in the room, because that's how white people have decided they want to run the planet, especially the most powerful, most intelligent white people who practice racism. So I think how white people have decided to run these race camps that we have confused with countries such as Brazil, places such as Nigeria. These are not countries, these are just race camps, and the evidence is there, because what happens in a race camp, people are mistreated, people don't get the help that they need, because countries are places where people get the help that they need and no one is mistreated. No such place exists. I really hope this. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think also too relevant to this Brazilization process is that this is a age-old tactic of racists, the Urugus, who have always created a racial buffer class. It's well documented in the destruction of Black civilization that these mixed, I don't want to say mixed, but I'll just use mixed for the sake of this. But this racial buffer class has been used to fight against the Black people, or the dark-skinned people who have been living there. So this is continuing. I think it would be ignorant for us to expect a different outcome. I definitely don't think that this process is going to produce a system of justice, because for one, this has been going on the planet forever, and a system of justice has yet to be produced.
Indeed, and you could definitely see like that new racial classification being produced with these images.
Sorry to cut you off again.
I'm not even gonna say the new racial classification, just the racial classification confusion, because not too sure if these people are white or non-white, so it's really white people are not going to be confused about if these people are white or non-white, but certainly we are.
It is also said that Brazil has the largest African population outside of Africa. The first would be Nigeria, so-called Nigeria, concept Nigeria, and then Brazil. So it's very interesting, and really think about why the white supremacist has decided to conduct this experiment in somewhere in concept Brazil.
Really interesting. Let's see.
I also think it's worth mentioning how he also talked about the California color code, and he didn't really say much, but I guess he implied that the similar thing is going on in California.
Yes,
And I thought,
yes, indeed, it is.
I thought, well, this is probably why, for much of my existence, even talking about the code, and even why I still get caught up in color classification confusion, or racist, I can't remember it, but this is probably why that is still so confusing for me sometimes, because it's going on right here in California where I'm located. Why continue to struggle with that? So I think for me, it just means greater efforts to just, racist man, racist woman, they do the color classification, meant to confuse me. That's all I need to know about it.
Excellent, smooth like butter understanding of what they're attempting to do. Yeah, and the California code is much like the so-called Brazilization. It's just them allowing a large number of people who may be white or may not be into the area to cause more division and more confusion as to what is happening. Because just like amongst the people who are classified as Black, the people who are classified as Latino or Hispanic, there's the same thing happening. There's the dark skinned Latinos and there's the lighter skinned Latinos, and they have also been conditioned to call the darker ones mayates, or just things that are not correct things to call a person simply because they are of darker complexion. So the message has the code is the white code, the white code of white supremacy has been computed world wide. So yeah, and I definitely have seen the what was happening in California, the area of the world known as California. And he says it, this portion right here in 310s, he says he lists various race camps that he's referring to as cities. And he says like Paris, France, and it says the racial experiment strategy, race mixing, Los Angeles, California, race mixing to test new color strains, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, multi-race mixing, intra-race classifications. So yeah, white people have a science about producing confusion about racial classification. It's all part of their business to keep us stumbling about, not focused on them, but wondering why I'm proud to be a Dominican, why I'm proud to be a Puerto Rican, talking about that stuff, and not when the hell are we going to end the torment of Black people worldwide.
Yeah, and I think it's really, I think it's quite constructive what Kahari and Haro writes here on page 311, when he says what must be done in terms of what we've been discussing today about what I've called, instead of colorism, I've suggested that we call it white supremacist color programming. White supremacist color programming, and he says what as a suggestion that he's got here on page 311. He says, establish equal physical and visual images of beauty. The particular color, economic, the peculiar color, economic, spiritual, and psychological issues facing all Black people must be brought out of the social closet. No longer can we use the excuse that it might hurt the fragile unity of the race to discuss the topic of that skin tone is really not an issue with Black people, because we all know that it is. If this issue is not effectively addressed, it will destroy Black people. There is already a very tense anger over this issue, which surfaces in many private relationships. Those who say that it is really not an issue with Black people are totally incorrect. It has been an issue for hundreds of years, but it has always been swept under the table. There are millions of dark-skinned and very light-skinned Black people, especially Black females, who have suffered the pains of racial confusion and identification, social rejection, and deep self-hate based around physical appearance. And yeah, and I think that's a good collection of words, combination of words that he's used here on 311, because sometimes we discuss racism, white supremacy in different ways. Some of us are a bit less confused than others. However, we tend to discuss this subject, and sometimes we think that this system is just going to go away by itself. Somehow it will just self-correct itself. One day, white people are just gonna just decide, oh, we just don't want to practice racism, white supremacy anymore. There's no evidence for that. I haven't seen that so far. There's been no evidence for that, that will happen for me. We are going to have to make it stop. We're going to have to produce a system of justice. We can't wait for white people to stop doing this. We are going to have to establish that for ourselves on this planet. People that actually want a system of justice on this planet. Justice, as we've said before, but I'll just repeat it again, justice being no one is allowed to be mistreated, right? And those who need help the most are given the most constructive help.
Absolutely. Well said, Mr. Damages. And I do appreciate him including solutions and corrective measures to what has been done to the thinking of Black people worldwide, and how we just need to, as I have on here on the screen for us, to the help of our reconditioning, we have to condition ourselves to understand and remember, because at some point in our time, we understood that, people with dark skin were the ultimate beauty. At one point in time in our existence, we equated this dark skin with the creator, with the most powerful force of all existence. Then white people sabotage and beat that out of us. But we have to remember that Black is very, very beautiful, and the foundation and the standard. So we have to begin to be aware of all the incorrect images portrayed, given to us by white people. When we see a dark-skinned person on the screen being silly, you should understand that this is an attack and part of the race war against us, and not be confused, to not let the image harm us or confuse us to believe that this is what we actually are, because no, we're mere victims who should be solving the race problem. We're not ugly beasts that white people love to portray us as, or want us to believe that we are. So we have to correct what's been done. And what Quaking
you know what earlier, you know what 05, this is what exactly why, that's why I said, like, what you said at the beginning of this broadcast is, just in case a lot of non-white people missed what you said, which is what I thought was quite important. So in terms of solutions, like I said, there's no evidence that these white people are just going to stop practicing racism, white supremacy. It's like what you said in terms of the rocket, when you made that analogy about the Buzz Lightyear, right, to infinity and beyond. That's the evidence, right? That's the evidence. That's the most telling thing I've seen, that in terms of this system. I've seen a lot of evidence that people who practice this system of white supremacy they're geared towards expanding this. They're geared toward expanding it to other planets. They're not, there's no evidence that they want to stop this practice of racism and white supremacy. So yeah, if you didn't catch what 05 said at the beginning of the broadcast, just rewind it and check it out. Because I think that Buzz Lightyear to infinity and beyond is very accurate.
Yeah, that's a powerful coded message right there. Given to children. It's telling the white children, don't worry. Your children or your children, they'll be on Mars, still kicking the black people around if you do what you need to do. Because black people probably aren't going to do what they need to do to get out of this mess we put them in. But motivation to solve the problem. Yeah, because they put it in there the cinema, and they got the Expanse. This is I'm gonna just put this on the screen really quickly. The Expanse. Let's see this. Hopefully it goes. The whole books and TV shows about white people going to space and still mistreating each other, still raping black females, pretending it's love. Pretending love exists in a world full of mistreatment and war and conflict. Going to space, spreading nonsense, whole galactic wars, and this is incorrect. We should keep, the murder and pillaging on planet Earth, eliminate it on planet Earth so it stops existing in the known universe forever. Very, very simple. And if you think, hey, murdering and pillaging is fine, people should die on planet Earth for no reason, then I must tell you, and I suspect you probably shouldn't exist on planet Earth. And the solve the race problem should be our priority, not letting white people go to Mars and spread this nonsense. Watching space TV and still seeing black people be made clowns, on your hover bike, flying through Jupiter and highway, listening to music of black people shooting each other with laser beams. Shouldn't happen. But that's what white people want. That's what they want.
All I had to add to that, wonderfully said by 05, Smoking Damages and panel. All I had to add was I also did appreciate the inclusion of strategies to counter. That's what I wrote it down as. So I think that these could definitely be constructive. I wrote down equalize the image of dark-skinned women and women in general. So I think, or females, sorry, under the system of racism, white supremacy. But well said. I have nothing to add.
Yeah, indeed. I think that's a perfect segue to get into our closing remarks. Anyone like to get started?
The only thing I could really add is I remember listening to so many sound clips, radio appearances, just broadcasts, lectures by Dr. Welsing, reading the ISIS papers a few times, and Dr. Welsing was at pains to just remind us that in order to solve the problem, you have to understand that there's a problem. You have to first understand that there's a problem, and you have to understand what the problem is. If we don't even understand what the problem is, if we don't understand the effects that the problem have had on us, if we've been conditioned to not even talk about the problem in an accurate way, then we don't have any kind of we're gonna, I don't know. It's going to be very, very difficult to solve that problem if you don't know the problem that we're actually dealing with. And a lot of us become intellectually complacent and think that we have all the answers. I'll include myself in that sometimes. I think I have all the answers, and I definitely don't, because if I did, I would have solved the problem by now, right? There's no non-white person I don't think that I've ever heard of or come across or listen to that has all of the answers. But if we put our collective brain computers together, we should be able to come up with solutions to this problem of racism, white supremacy. It's been here for long enough, and we should just really strategize in all areas of people activity to solve this problem. It's not going to go away by magic. It's going to go away when we do something about the problem. Identify the problem, look at how the problem was made, who put it together, and then just develop strategies to counter that particular problem.
Indeed. To add to that, I've always liked to say that, you know, the answer to solving problems, or the problem, is not going to come from us watching HBO Max, not going to come from us watching these silly sitcoms, etc. I think that the business meeting was constructive. Ultimately, Black people learning to practice Black self-respect would go a long way towards producing a system of justice. Constructive business meeting. Looking forward to the next one.
Constructive business meeting. This section definitely gave me more insight into how white supremacists use color codes, like specific color codes of people. And I think even before, like throughout the book, we talked about, are we specifically focused on images of color, such as like things being dark colored or things being light colored. But I think it's very interesting to see, like, even colored people, obviously, I use the term color, not like colored people, but I use the term like darker skinned people or quote unquote light skinned people, and how they use that within Black people to continue to practice racism. Yeah, so constructive business meeting. Excited to continue on.
Thank you, fellow hosts. And I would just continue begging the audience and folks who find this broadcast to please become a part of the effective number who will solve the race problem. Please go to producejustice.com, get your copy of the code book. And back to I'm gonna get to the chat before we head out. They said Leon Harris. They also make it seem like all creatures live this way, and that is correct. Very constructive business. This is from Race 1/0. Very constructive business meeting. Black people must get over our failure to engage against racism. Fear. And that's an excellent acronym and definition for fear. Failure to engage against racism. And I hope folks take away from this broadcast is to, understand that the damage done to us is by racist men and racist women, and these people can only be white people. May not be all of the white people, but it's only white people. So the damage is very severe, but it's definitely correctable. And we will be closing out with Nyan Saysam, A Calendar of Revolutionary Daily Thoughts by Mawalimu K. Baruti. And this, because it is April, because we've been led to believe it's April 3rd, 2022, we'll be reading the revolutionary thought for April 3rd. So let's read, and we will see everyone next week. Please share this information, like, comment, share, and subscribe. And back to the revolutionary daily thought. To deculturalize African American children is therefore to deprive them of that which determines the way they think, feel, and behave. Felix Bolding. We cannot afford to forget who we are and what we must do to return our truth to power. The penalty for our descendants is too high. They must be made to remember who they are, or they will be led even further into the blinding whiteness many of us run blindly towards. It is said that it only takes 2 willfully ignorant generations for a people to completely lose their way. Conscious African adults must recognize, however, that regardless of how thorough and invulnerable we believe ourselves to be. Our children cannot be completely sheltered from an evil insanity without separating them from the call of insanity in a world where insanity rules. Western culture is consciously insidious, and the carriers of Western culture know that the best way to dislocate, fragment, and destroy a people is to corrupt their children. To be someone other than ourselves is to be insane. To knowingly make choices which allow our children to be driven insane is unforgivable. Therefore, African logic dictates the need for an independent, separate, protected community in which we can rear our children into African adults, or all efforts will be for naught. If you swim in the ocean of insanity, you're bound to get wet. If we are rearing our children to be true nation builders, we have no choice. There are chances we absolutely cannot take. Affirm, I am returning truth to our power. Yeah, I didn't read this quote beforehand, but there's definitely something to be thought about in this quote here. So thank everyone for participating here with us in this business meeting. We'll see you all next time.